I just like to hold space for people and help make sure that they feel very comfortable. I think it comes from a very young age, where I just, I want everyone around me to be happy and to feel like they could be their most authentic selves.
When you're doing energy healing and you are holding space for someone else, where did that come from? Like, how do you just naturally know how to hold space for someone?
I think it comes from a very young age of, I grew up in a household that was very chaotic, and a lot of my family and friends, in general, would just come to me for, just to vent, to let things out, for advice. And I would just sit there and hold that space for them and empathize with them and try to understand where they're coming from and their perspective. So automatically, holding that space for them, just I grew up doing that, to help people around me. So that's kind of become my life mission to, um, help people work through their issues and their trauma, to be able to, I guess, it even comes with the healing too. When they tell me their issues, just listening and understanding where they're coming from is a healing in itself.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it just comes from that, like trying to be that light in someone's life.
So, just on a personal level, because, if you start doing that at a young age, we all have to take care of ourselves at some point in that. And you didn't really
Mm-hmm.
say anything about how you took care of yourself. Is that, a learned holding space for other people being a learned situation, but how did you pull yourself through that? Because if you were growing up in a chaotic household, then you must have experienced trauma yourself.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So, how did I work through that? Well, it was through, um, going through therapy, talking about, like, and even the therapist would say, "Well, why? You're." I always hear you say, "Oh, I'm here for this person. I'm helping this other person. I'm, taking care of my child. I'm taking care of, the men that were in my life. But what about you?"
Mm-hmm.
I just lost sight of how, to heal my own self. So it was really like eye opening that I had to sit down and really process my emotions and understand that, I can't pour from an empty cup. I'm supposed to be pouring from a full cup that's overflowing to help other people. So at first I didn't like that answer, because I'm like, no, that's how I get, my happiness is to being devoted to helping others. But through a lot of self reflection, self awareness, meditation, and just doing things that made me happy, I was able to replenish that. And Reiki, of course, helped me
Yeah.
to process those emotions that were deeply embedded in myself, my energetic space, and my soul.
Do you feel that, I guess I'm going to use the word excuse, the excuse of that's how I get my happiness is by helping other people, was really a trauma response for you in a way to kind of push away all the stuff that you needed to work through and all those little things that you need to do for yourself?
Definitely, it was a trauma response, in saying that I had, like, performance anxiety. I was always looking to someone for the answers, looking to someone for help, um, and then in turn I would help someone. It would make me feel good, saying, "Okay, well, I'm getting the healing from helping them." But yes, it was so those emotions were so deeply embedded, I didn't even know how to process them. And it took years to really understand, and a couple of spiritual awakenings, and
Mm-hmm.
to really love those spiritual awakenings,
Oh yeah,
to
I mean, a
just
good slap in the face.
process everything, like, oh, I thought I dealt with this. Oh, actually, no, you didn't. You just, you're so busy taking care of others that it you know I, it almost like that band-aid ripped off for me.
Right.
Mhm.
So what was your most influential spiritual awakening? I mean, they all obviously had some kind of influence, but
Oh,
like, what was the one that when you felt it, you're like, holy smokes, what happened there?
My most influential spiritual awakening was, I'd say, during the pandemic. Actually, a little bit before the pandemic. So I in my 9 to 5 career, I was in working in HR and human resources, and in for the 15 years. So very, I knew what I was doing, and I got this job where something was telling me not to take the job because it seemed like a toxic environment, but I took it anyway because I was like, oh, the benefits are great, the pay is great, so let me just see what happens.
Yeah.
And it ended up being a shit show, and I did very poorly. I wasn't set up for success from the beginning, and I got overwhelmed with the tasks that I had to do, and I ended up getting fired. So for me, that was a huge awakening, like an ego trip. Like, it really
Right.
affected me, where I was like, it's something that I've been doing for 15 years that I know like the back of my hand. How dare you fire me? And also, like, do I really know what I'm doing or who I am? So I went through this whole, feeling of internal depression, and it took me for a while to understand, what had happened and the different sides to the story, and what I could have done better, what they could have done better. And during that time, the pandemic hit. So we, in Montreal, where I grew up, before I moved to BC, Canada, we were locked in our homes. Like, we couldn't leave our homes, only to go to the grocery store, or go to the pharmacy,
Mhm.
to get medication. So we were just for 3 whole months by ourselves in our homes. And I wasn't working. So I was stuck with my self, my feelings, my emotions. And then in the middle of the night, my ears would start ringing, and I'd have these crazy vivid dreams of being on, different planets, and different, emotions would start popping up during the day, where I was like, I thought I dealt with this. So that was, and during that time as well, I had already gotten my second course in Reiki. So I was getting my Reiki Masters, and I was going through that whole, like, there's a whole detox period that you go after you start healing yourself energetically, and emotions start popping up. And it was just like everything just fell onto me, really hardcore. And so I had to deal with it all on my own. So part of what I do as well is when, clients come to me and they're like, all these things are happening, and, friends that I thought were my friends are not my friends anymore. And I can't sleep at night, and I'm, trying to figure out my purpose in life. What I thought was what I was supposed to do forever, is not, doesn't give me that passion anymore. I know that feeling. So it was just like I had to go through it. So I did it by finding a community of people who think like me, who are also trying to figure out their most authentic self, bringing that, like, breaking through those chains that bind them. And yeah, I Reiki really helped me to heal myself as well.
It's hard to find that community when you don't know who you are or where you're going, especially if you've, like, using your situation, you thought you were like awesome at HR and this, that, and the other thing, and which I'm sure you are. But,
Mm.
you know, losing that job and getting fired and being shaken at the core like that, how are you
Mm-hmm.
supposed to figure out which direction you're going to go? Like, what would be your main piece of advice to someone who's feeling lost like that and just kind of had everything, their whole world ripped apart, basically? Where do you start?
um, I was really fortunate to have, love in my household. I have a good partner that would, encourage me to try different things, and a wonderful daughter who helped to keep my inner child alive. But really, it was just, for me, it was a very internal feeling. Just, if when emotions were coming up, to sit with them, to understand why and where they come from, and to just feel them,
Mm-hmm.
and then journal it. if that emotion comes through, write down how, like, why is this happening? What, where does this come from? And just be ready to let them go.
Yeah.
And really just finding that community. So I found it online, and all I did was like, hey, I'm looking for friends that, think like me. I joined Facebook groups. I was on this audio app where I forgot what it was called now, Clubhouse. And so I went on Clubhouse, and I was like, hey, I'm looking for someone, people who are looking for the, sitting with themselves, looking to expand their awareness and their spirituality. And I'm learning Reiki. Who else thinks like me? So,
Right.
excuse me. So it was really to, like, for me, it was more of the community of finding like-minded people.
We need to take a step back sometimes and go back to when we're kids. And when we show up at the playground, just run up to someone who we're drawn to and be like, hey, you want to be friends with me?
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with putting it out there. I see it on occasion. And people, it's like moms who have just moved to a new place and have 2 young kids or whatever, and they put it out on the mom group like, hey, I don't normally do this, but I'm alone and I need some friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's a bad thing to do that. It's not, how else are you supposed to find people? And, a lot of the time when you meet someone for the first time and they end up becoming someone important in your life, that was the one time you let your guard down in order to let that happen, right?
I don't know if you remember, Rose, but when we first met, I went to one of and it was all about finding that community, finding those like-minded people. So when I moved to BC, Canada, and I went to Wellington, I went to one of those energy circles those intuitive circles that you hold. And
Yeah.
I met you, and we had no idea, like, we never, I don't even think we sat down, but actually we went to a circle and you sat next to me.
Mm-hmm.
And after the circle, you were like, I don't know who you are, and I know this is a really weird question, but do you want to be my friend? Do you want to hang out? And I'm just like, yeah, sure.
I was saying it worked out fine, didn't it?
Yeah.
But that's the thing, is when I was sitting beside you in that circle, I was open to your energy because, well, that's the whole point of it, right? But I just felt drawn to you. And so, trusting in that and just asking, I don't know if you thought that was weird or not. Like, what was your response to that in your head?
I felt the same way. But I didn't know how to tell you, like, do you want to be friends? But I actually didn't even know who you were. Like, I didn't even know that you were the co-owner of Wellington. I had no idea who you were, but I'm like, there's something about this woman. I just, I want to hang out with her. I want to get to know her. So the fact that you had said, you want to be my friend, I was like, oh, wow. Like, she felt it too.
I remember going home and telling Dave, I was like, I was just the biggest idiot. I was like, I don't know how she's going to respond to this, but he just laughed at me. That's okay. It's those experiences and those things that you look back at, and that's what kind of builds who you're becoming or supports who you truly are, right?
Yeah. So just to recap on what, it was more about finding, for me at least, it was finding that community of like-minded people, that people who were not, judging everything that I was saying. Cause, you go into different groups, friend groups, and it was always like, who was trying to get the best Instagram picture, or who, it was very high level, and I wanted to go deeper. And then just sitting with myself and my emotions, was very important. It was more of an internal thing for me. And then I went down the rabbit hole of trying to find the answers as to why my ears were ringing and why I was having the crazy vivid dreams. And I started reading very spiritual books, like Dolores Cannon was a really big one for me. Like, and just finding for myself, what is my purpose? And it was very simple. It was just to love, to spread love, honestly, and positivity, through those dark times.
Those times are hard. I don't think a lot of people talk about it as often as they should, about how when you decide you're going to start following your path and start going along the lines that you feel you need to become who you need to become, you almost lose every friend that you have. And it's not that
Yeah.
they leave you or you leave them, it's just eventually you seriously have nothing else to talk about. And those relationships are done, those contracts are finished. So it's almost like they just kind of float away and you don't even notice that they're going until all of a sudden they're all gone. And you're like,
Mm-hmm.
wait a second, I'm alone again. So, the finding that community is more or less like opening yourself up and looking for those new people that are supposed to be in your life to support you in the new direction that you're going, even though you don't know what that is, right?
Yeah, that was my problem too. I would, meet somebody and then go really deep, really fast, and they would get scared, like scared off.
I'm like, who is this
And I'd be
person?
like, but I just, because I've been through a lot of grief in my life. From a young age, I was 7 years old. My sister passed away. She tried heroin for the first time and she overdosed. And then, so that I think was a big thing for my family, where they were trying to process that as well. And that's where the chaos came from. My mother felt very guilty, my father, and shameful of like, I could have done better as a mother, and they were very protective over me because they were scared that the same thing was going to happen to me. And then my father was very angry, just angry in general, but from childhood, his own traumas, but he took it out, I think, on the family and on my mother verbally. And so I was always just trying to get away from my home, and I would stay at my aunt's house. And then my aunt got really sick and she passed away, and I was about 12 years old. And then I had to go back to my house, and it was still like that chaotic energy, always saying like my brother would hang out in his room, and I would try to go upstairs and hold that space for everyone. And so I was in the middle of it. And then when I was 16, my father passed away from a car accident. So a lot of grief and a lot of self-reflection happened during that time, that even though he was an angry person and even though he caused a lot of chaos, it did affect the family tremendously, where he, the love is still there, but it was all of these passing away, like all of this grief was very sudden for the whole family. So we went through a lot in that point in time. During, I think it was like every 5 years I'd have a death in the family.
Yeah.
So when I do Reiki sessions, and specifically on the heart space, I feel when I do feel that grief, because I intuitively feel the emotions that are stuck in people's energy fields. I know right away. I'm like, okay, I know that feeling. I could recognize it.
That's a lot of different types of role models that would have been in your life.
Yeah.
Like, it was older sister, obviously, if you're 7,
Yeah.
and then an aunt.
Yeah. She was 15. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So then when you're feeling somebody else's emotions, like, does that tell you how when you read their emotions, how do you know how to help them?
I
Do you even
tried.
know?
I don't. Yeah, that's what I'm like. But it's like I hold that space for the healing to come through.
Right.
I think of Reiki. If you go look at on Google, it's like, oh, hands-on technique that helps to rebalance and everything. So yeah, that is the term for it. But for me, it's like a spa for the soul, I like to call it, because you go in there and you try to be in the moment and keep your heart space open, and whatever comes through, and you don't have to believe in it, you don't have to say specifically what you want to happen. It just happens, and the healing goes where it needs to go. So when I come in with the intention of love, which what Reiki is unconditional love that comes through. it's just an extra, I guess, feeling that I get along with the love that comes through. I do feel the pain that's being healed on a deeper level.
Yeah.
And people think, oh, I had a Reiki session, I got some energy healing, I'm completely cured, I'll see you again when things are bad. But no, it's a lifelong journey of balancing, your mind, body, spirit. And in this case, we're talking about spirit, but um you have to work. I do give people homework to really, and it's fun homework, like go out in nature, and like, yes, there's those things, but also to that deep work that you have to sit with those emotions when they come through, because Reiki just opens up opens everything up for you to heal. So yes, I do hold that space, and I do channel that beautiful loving energy, and I feel for you, and we go through that together, to bring more clarity and awareness to yourself. But essentially, it's up to you also to process whatever comes through as well.
Right. And a lot of people, I feel that we've been all running from our traumas and running from what hurts us for so long, right? You just kind of push it away. And then
Yeah.
eventually, when the time comes that you have to acknowledge it, work through it, however that works, whether you knew it was coming or not, right? Sometimes it'll, surprise you,
Mm-hmm.
come out of nowhere. Um, but like, how do you accept how the trauma has changed you, or if the like we kind of mentioned before that trauma can determine who you are, who you become, right? But it's really hard for people to sit back and acknowledge that while they're feeling the feelings of the trauma. how
Mm-hmm.
how do you do that? I mean, you've been through a lot of grief. At what point did you take a look back and go, okay, I'm going to work through all of this? And then, did you become grateful for those things that happened to you, even though they were horrible? Or, do you attribute who you are today because of what you've experienced in your past?
Yes to all of those things. So yes, there was a lot of like sitting with myself and understanding, like, not the why things happen, because a lot of people were like, why are I'm such a good person, or I've never done anything wrong, why are these things happening to me? But it was like I switched the mindset to, these things happen to me for a reason, and you have to find the reason for yourself. So my reason was to help people and to hold that space and to inspire them. And whenever those thoughts pop up where, I miss my sister, or, why did my father pass away so early? All of those things. Um, I always say, well, I switch it. Like, I am actually grateful that I had a sister for, 7 years of my life. And
Yeah.
I'm grateful that I had, a father who, although he wasn't perfect by any means, he did love me and taught me a lot about, the world around me. So just switching that victim mentality as to why this happened to me to uh, a more positive mindset. And that just helped me to understand, like, that the trauma is to accept it, and then just letting it go too, because you can't stay in that energy all the time, like, oh, woe is me, this happened to me. It's good to leave that, past in the past and live in the moment. um Easier said than done.
Well,
uh, but live in the moment and to just accept and forgive. Right. So I was saying before, my father wasn't perfect. Well, I went through a stage of forgiveness as to, and understanding why he was the way he was, and why, uh, and how what that taught me.
I feel you're using a lot of terminology that will be very triggering for people who are just newly going through something or haven't quite gotten to that point, right?
Yeah.
Using the word like victim mentality and everything happens for a reason. This happened for a reason. Forgiveness is a big one too. it's not a matter of like taking all these key terms and throwing them, at yourself or at people. It's almost like everybody who's been through something traumatic or has worked through all of that stuff and done the work and taken the time to go through all of those steps and all of that anger and all of that
Mm-hmm.
stuff, everybody gets to that point, right? Like, even when I look back, why did I get cancer? Why did my daughters have to deal with this?
Mm-hmm.
Poor me, like, I got to do this, I got to do that. Poor everybody else in my world who had to deal with the same stuff at their own levels. But I also feel grateful for what I've been through, because if I didn't go through that, I definitely wouldn't be here. You know what I
Exactly. Yeah.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, but yeah, I feel that it's necessary for people to hear and understand that if you're going through something new, or, you're just starting to take a look at all these heavy emotions and, difficult terms, like if you say something like, I forgive this person, and it really triggers you, then it's not that you have to forgive them right away, but you got to look at yourself like, why is this bothering me so much? Right?
Exactly. Like
Yeah.
your triggers are actually what need healing. If you're feeling triggered, it's really, taking that time to introspect to understand why does that trigger you, and it's okay to feel triggered. It's just to be able to process it in the way that you feel most comfortable. So again, creating that own safe space for yourself. For me, meditation was always very, important, but I didn't learn how to meditate for a very long time. I was how am I going to sit here and concentrate for 20 minutes or half an hour about nothing? Like your mind
Right.
starts wandering, you start going into your past and start thinking, worrying about the future. It was really hard for me to be in the now. So I did it more through dance. So I'll put on like a song that makes me feel good, or a song that makes me feel sad or whatever, and then I would just get those emotions out through dancing. So whatever, that being in the moment means to you, to help process it. So yeah, if you are feeling triggered, it's definitely, uh, to look into why is it triggering you. It's not it
And
it needs to come up to the surface to be healed.
right. I guess it's more about the acknowledgement doesn't necessarily mean that you have to accept or let go of or fix or anything. It's
Yeah.
just acknowledging is just noticing that it's happening. And
Yeah.
then, each time you notice, like, you're technically working on it just by noticing it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, you don't have
Exactly.
to put in this huge, like, even if you're meditating or you're trying to meditate and all these things are floating into your head, those are all things that are going to help you. Those are all things that are reasons that you're thinking about this stuff, right?
Right.
And just the acknowledgement, even writing it down. You only need to sit in it even for a minute if that's how it feels comfortable for you, and then move on to the
Mm-hmm.
next thing, right?
Right.
But I mean, I guess.
Sometimes I have like clients that I go in their heart space and they're like, I say, there's a grudge that's being held. I feel it. And the only way through that is forgiveness. But forgiveness is a two-way street, even though you're like, well, why would I forgive someone who's done something so bad to me, and why do I need forgiveness from them? But I challenge you to actually write down, a letter to that person, and starting with what that trigger was that came through, like what, and then writing, I forgive you for this, I forgive you for that. And then in turn, when you're done um, saying, I forgive you, actually switching it, saying, please forgive me.
Right.
And that's the hardest part, because then the ego kicks in, and then you're like, well, why should I ask for forgiveness? I never did anything wrong. But I promise you, if you do it, it actually helps to heal yourself, as like, um, it just it I guess it makes you see that there was a two-way street to the trauma that was happening.
Right. And the most eye-opening forgiveness exercise that I ever did is, it's not that when you're asking someone to forgive you, right? So you've written, no, you've done
Mhm.
this wrong to me, blah, 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 I forgive
Yeah.
you. But, when you say, hey, can I, forgive me for, it's not that you've done anything wrong, but sometimes it's asking for forgiveness on something that just wasn't of their capacity to do. Like, I've had to do a forgiveness exercise where I had to say, please forgive me for expecting more of you than you could have ever provided for me,
Yeah.
right? Please
Hmm.
forgive me for holding that standard so high that you would never have been able to achieve it, right? And
Hmm.
it's not that you did anything wrong by that, but it's more or less acknowledging that now you've learned a little bit more,
Yeah.
right? And like taking a look at that situation from a different viewpoint, putting, just expecting love from someone shouldn't be something to be, forgiven for. But maybe
Hmm.
that person has never been shown love and would never know it.
Exactly.
They're trying, but you just had a higher expectation than what they could provide, right? And you would know that
Exactly.
once you get to that point, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. So it's not necessarily that you did anything wrong. Sometimes it's just the action that you did do.
Right.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. No, it's always perspective, right? Everybody needs to remember that, like, different situations that we're in or different situations that other people are in, even though they seem similar on the surface, is when we were learning or growing or exposed to this, our perception of what happened was completely different. So,
Right.
you may have lost your dad at 16 and someone else may have lost their dad at 16. Sounds the same. Yeah, we can relate. It's like, but can you? Does anybody truly know how you're feeling when it comes to the trauma? And, you know,
No, because
asking,
it's your perspective of it.
right. So
Yeah.
then that kind of asks the question, how do people find, I guess, the courage within themselves, or how do they try to figure out, what they need? Because people have never, if they don't understand your perspective, how are people going to know how to help you? Right.
Hmm.
And so, do you feel that when someone comes in for a treatment, or if you found something that they're holding, do they need to sit with how to ask their loved ones or their support system, to tell them how to help them, or to help them figure out how to help them if they don't know how to help themselves? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, how do you
Yeah.
ask for that help if you don't know what you need? To quote,
That's
it's
a good question.
right. That's a stumper. As I'm
Hmm.
asking it, I'm like, I don't even know how to do that. But I find maybe just being honest, like in my experience, um, I've had a lot of change, right? And I've processed a lot of stuff that manifesting cancer and creating that situation for myself. Um, there's a lot of emotional issue that comes by that, right? And
Yeah.
so I found being honest with, let's just say, my husband, like, I don't know how to make this go away. I don't know how to help myself. I don't know how to ask you to help me, but I just know that I need help. So can you
Yeah.
tell me what you see? You know what I mean? Sometimes if you've got that support system, you don't have to figure it out on your own, but it's finding that courage to just say, hey, I'm totally lost and I have no idea what to do.
Yeah. I need help. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
But I
just
guess
being vulnerable about it. You don't have to have all the answers or know what's going on. It's just being open and vulnerable about not being okay and not knowing,
right.
you know.
Surrendering to just your, I guess that boils down to surrendering to your feelings and just actually
Yeah.
feeling them. Because if you're feeling lost, on top of angry, on top of dealing with grief, all those things, like,
Yeah.
they're all intertwined. Mm,
Yeah. And those emotions, what happens over time is they get lodged in our bodies, and if we don't process them, they end up being a physical issue.
right.
So, for example, I got pregnant when I was 18, and the pregnancy was really tough. I felt like I was alone, and I was so young. I had nobody to go to. It wasn't like today where you can just join a Facebook group. This was a while back, about 14 years ago. So there wasn't, social media wasn't as advanced. And I grew up in an Italian family, which was very traditional. So, it was very like, they, not that they judged me, but they were upset with me because I was so young.
Yeah.
And so, and I was going to church at that time. I was, in a Christian group, and they judged me and shunned me from the church because I, had a child out of wedlock. So I was very alone, and the father of the child was not around. He is today, but he was not around during the whole pregnancy. So I had I was very alone. I felt uncomfortable in my body, and when I had my child, it was a very traumatic birth. Now fast forward 14 years later, I suppressed that emotion in my hip space, and it just stayed lodged there, and I thought that I dealt with it, and I just, was so used to like going through the motions of being a mother and, working, and I just never really dealt with that feeling. And I ended up being in a loving relationship in the end. But at the time I was dating, I didn't know what was, who I was or what was going on. And so it turned into like my hips. Now my hips don't lie, basically. It turned into like pain in my hip space, and issues being unbalanced. So when I found Reiki and I started practicing it, at first, when I first got the session, I didn't even know what it was. It helped to rebalance that area. And then those emotions came, crashing through. And then I had to process them. So, but it ended up manifesting itself into a physical issue. And even to this day, I have to stretch more, and I have to, when I meditate, I have to focus on that area of my body, just because I suppressed for so long those feelings. So,
It's not that that space won't heal, it just takes time, right?
it takes time. Yeah, it's not like, I don't like saying something's blocked, when they say, oh, your chakras are blocked. I just feel like they're unbalanced. So our life journey, like, things will always happen. We'll always go through something. We feel like everything's okay, and then something happens. We lose someone, we lose that job, or things don't go the way that we had planned in our heads, and then, things tend to get unbalanced. We're not able to express ourselves, so we're unbalanced in our throat area. We go through a divorce. Our heart space gets heavy. So it's just up to us to help to rebalance those areas in our bodies. So when someone comes through for a Reiki session, we really take some time to get to know what part of those energetic centers what are they connected to, so you can feel like, oh, if I'm feeling unbalanced today, it just means that I need to ground myself. If my throat is feeling sore and the words are not coming out, well, I need to speak my truth. There's something that I need to say, and it needs to come out. So it's a learning curve as well.
I guess trusting in what comes up at that time is what you should be dealing with. It's not like you're going to go into a Reiki session and every trauma that's being held in your body is going to be brought up all at once,
No.
right?
No,
The
exactly.
trauma that's supposed to come up right now is going to come. So let's say it was your hips, right? It's not your throat, your heart. Like, energy work doesn't work that way, where it's like, here's all of the stuff that happened
Oh
to you.
no,
You know what
you
I
get
mean?
too overwhelmed.
Just one thing at a time, but that's going to be the
Yeah.
thing that's for your highest and best right now. Kind of
Mhm.
guide you in the direction to help you make that next choice in the healing journey, or however you want to describe it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, thank you
Yeah,
for
every
sharing.
session is different. Yeah, um I could work on someone, once a week, and something new pops up,
Right.
and but it's just having that awareness, once you start tapping into your spiritual self, and you work through that anxiety, depression, and those negative feelings, then you start being more self-aware of who you are, and your awareness expands. And so it's easier to notice those little signs that you wouldn't have noticed before.
Right. I find now, having done a fair amount of self-work on self-work, right?
Work.
Just when you sit within yourself and you're working on trying to do the next step, right? You're not always going to be able to do it on your own. And especially if you're feeling like you're starting this journey or you don't know where to turn, asking for someone's help can be the easiest way to do it. Even though inside of like yourself, you're probably like, oh, I can't ask anybody for help right now. But if I've learned anything, is when you start to feel like you're stuck and you feel like there's something in there that's too deep for you to go because it's just not safe to go there on your own, finding someone to help you and support you, even if it's someone you don't know. Sometimes it's easier when it's someone you don't know.
Sometimes it's easier. Yeah.
Yeah. And the energy work can just bring that right to the surface.